Java is an object-oriented programming language. In this video, I'm going to show you how we write classes and then how we build objects. So I'm going to add a class to this project by using the new class option in Eclipse. And I'm going to call it my class. Now, classes consist of member variables. For example, we can use primitive data types or we can use other classes. In this class, I'm just going to add two primitive integer data types. I'm going to call one my number 1, and the other one my number 2. And they also have methods. So methods can take parameters and return values. So for this class, I'm going to add an add method, and I'm going to return the value of the two numbers added together. So the return value is going to be an integer. The method is going to be called add numbers, and it's going to return my number 1 plus my number 2. So now I'm going to add a main method because this is our main class in the project. So public static, this is just the standard way we write our main method. And I'm going to build an object called my object of the type my class. So I say my class, that's the type of it, my object, that's the name of it, equals new my class. So now we have an object called my object of the type my class. Now I can access these things inside the object by putting a full stop. So I can say my object dot my number 1 equals 2, and my object my number 2 equals 3, and then I can system out print line. I want to call the add numbers method in my object dot add numbers. I'll just add something here. The result is so now I'll just test this program, so I'll run as a Java application, and the result is 5. So we've any object of the type my class contains two numbers, and it has a method add numbers that returns an integer value. If we didn't want to return anything from a method, we'd put void here, like in the main method. Now when we see public and private, this is the visibility of the things in the class. So for example, this is public int my number 2, and the method is also public. We can also use private or protected in place of this public. What private means is it can't be seen from outside of objects of this class. So really that means that when we're constructing the object, we're not really supposed to see private things from outside of that object. There's also protected, and we'll go on to what that means in a later video when we do some of the object-oriented principles. There's also a special method called a constructor. Now what a constructor is, it's a public method, and it takes the same name as the class itself, and it doesn't have a return type, so we don't need to say public void my class, we just say public my class. And what a constructor does is it runs when the object is built. So if I do a system out print line here, my class object constructed, then when we run this program now, when we run this line here, we should get the output my class object constructed. And we can also add parameters to my class. So what we might want to do is add some of the parameters to set up the state of the object when we build my class. So I'm going to add two parameters, one for my number one and one for my number two. And I'm going to call them the same name because it's quite common to do that. So int my number one, int my number two. Now we have an error here because I'm trying to call a constructor without any parameters. It is possible to have multiple constructors, one with and one without, but now that we've defined this constructor, we have to use it because we don't have a constructor without any parameters. So now I can do what we were doing before, but I can pass in the parameters to my class. So my number one we want to be 2, and my number 2 we want to be 3. But I have to do something with those parameters. I have to say this dot my number one equals my number one, and the same thing for my number two. When I say this dot, I mean this object, so I'm saying the my number one variable that belongs to this object. It's colored blue, it shows it's that one. If we don't put this, it will default to that, but because we have a local variable as well, it will be that. So the green ones here correspond with the parameters coming in. Now I can make these numbers private because I no longer need to set them from outside. So now when I run, the result should be exactly the same because I'm creating our object with the parameters 2 and 3, and I'm adding the numbers together and getting the result back as a parameter. So the result is just the same. Now I can also create another object. My object 2, and this time I'll do it with the values 1 and 5. And this time for my object 2. So the first object is returning 2 plus 3, and the second object is returning 1 plus 6. So when we're writing our programs, really the first thing we'll do is decide which classes we need and how the object structure of the code is going to work. And the more you do it, the more practice you get, the better you'll get at it. So thanks for watching.